news.
And that's American Family News for this hour, available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The Awakening on Urban Family Talk.
You know, a bunch of people who thought Obama was the Messiah. There are a lot of people who are kind of treating Trump like that.
Bishop E.W. Jackson.
Folks, I'm not looking for a Messiah. I've already got one. His name is Jesus, the Son of the living God. We put our ultimate trust in him. All other human beings are fallible.
The Awakening, weekday mornings at 9 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The agenda I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. It's the agenda of the American people. We must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hello, welcome to the program today. Thank you for being with us on American Family Radio, where we are broadcasting live and direct to you, really all over the world, because we have international viewers and listeners to the podcast, but also primarily on our terrestrial radio stations, 180 plus of those spread across 32 states and 800 communities, 800 plus. I'm just so excited to be with you today. And if you notice a little pep in my step, it's because I was a little I don't want to say I had negative expectations, but I was a little reticent. I was a little hesitant to get pumped up. I was excited to hear what the president had to say, but I wasn't sure how he was going to bring the really sobering information about the southern border and the opioid deaths and our foreign policy aims, ending the INF treaty. There's so many news items that are really, they're consequential and they're serious. And I thought to myself, it's going to be tough for President Trump to bring that out, but still be positive and upbeat. And we'd heard from Corey Lewandowski yesterday on the show that it was going to be an upbeat speech, a speech about unity. And so I was expecting good things, but I was also holding back a little bit because Nancy Pelosi is going to be just over his left shoulder, making faces, sucking her lips, and just the whole tenor of the room. I didn't even know they were going to do a white version of Handmaid's Tale with some of the women from the Democrat side to make themselves stand out and kind of make a spectacle. But it came together so beautifully. And I think the president, possibly it was his best speech that he's given so far during his 2 years as president. I think it rivaled any other time that he has spoken from a podium in a very presidential manner. My expectations were exceeded. And we have a press release that we put out through Project 21, the Leadership and Advisory Council for National Center for Public Policy Research. And it was a number of us, 6 of us, who had comments about the speech, and we're doing some media on it. And I'm really excited about it's like opening a door and saying, let's get together here. Let's work together. Regardless of our partisanship, we've jousted, we've crossed swords. We may have even drawn a little blood, but this is about America. And there were some really inspiring moments in the speech last night. So we're going to talk about that. We'll take some calls. We are also going to speak to John Miller. He's a White House correspondent for CRTV. He's one of our favorites. And he's going to join us to talk about the CBS poll. It came out last night, and it was a stunner. 76% of viewers approved of the president's speech. 76% of viewers. And I know they tried to spin it a little later because CNN had a very similar poll result from their, the people they called and talked to. What's interesting is they're trying to frame this as the only people who watched the State of the Union last night were Trump supporters. Now, I can tell you that's just not true. I know that Democrats watch the speech. Look at Twitter, the trending items on Twitter. But Twitter doesn't exactly represent America's population. And so there were others who don't tweet who watched it, and they were positive about it. And I think it's because he spent time laying out what he had, the president did, what he had on his agenda, what some of the accomplishments were. And he was a little bellicose. Let's face it. He was, dramatic with his adjectives. He pumped up the performance of the items that he was touting as his accomplishments. But if you see through all of that, kind of, peel back the beautiful, fluffy, oversized, outstanding layers, and you look at the actual metrics, the president has performed. He gets blamed when the economy is bad. He gets to take a little bit of credit when it's good. I don't believe the president and the government is the sole source for us to be excited about our economic outlook, especially since we know that it's private business, it's small businesses, it's big businesses, it's Wall Street, it's you, it's me shopping and buying clothes and shoes and milk and eggs and bread, and it's us doing our little side gigs, side businesses, side hustles. It's us buying vacation, little condo to stay in on vacation, or plane tickets to go on a trip. That's what drives the economy. But the president has unleashed an atmosphere in which that can happen by reducing regulation and cutting taxes. And so he does get some credit. What I want to jump into really quickly is Daily Confession today. We are going to be talking about Psalm 23. And this is, by bar none, one of my favorite verses in the Bible. And the reason is because a friend of mine actually, I was having some things I was talking to her about. She was like, you know what? I think you need to study and meditate on Psalm 23. And I was like, okay. So, usually I'm like, really? Because I kind of like this psalm or that psalm. But I just took her for her word and started reading it every day and asking the Lord to show me some things about it. And the reason I want to share it with you is because after last night, I feel like it's always good to find true north. Find true north and figure out what we're supposed to be thinking and how we're supposed to kind of view our circumstances, whether it's disappointment or whether you're like me, Snoopy dancing into tomorrow with, a song of praise on your lips because some prayers have been answered. You still have to orient yourself to true north, which we can find by going straight to God's word. So we all know Psalm 23. It's so familiar. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul, leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So the verses I want to focus on are prepare us a table before me. This is verse 5, in the presence of my enemies, and anoints my head with oil. My cup runs over. So the danger of death is past in this verse. And David reverts to the thought of tranquil, happy, joyous time in which God has granted him a respite from running and kind of the perils of where he found himself in his life. He has adversaries, but unless God gives the room for them to touch David, they cannot touch him. So as perilous as things may seem, they can't lay a finger on David because he is anointed and God is in control of his life. So they can look on David, and remember, David is the one who wrote this psalm. He's talking about the experiences in his life. But for us, we're in the position of David where God is looking after us. And God is absolutely laying a table in front of us for us to enjoy the bounty of his blessings, which increase with our obedience. So our joy increases with obedience, and our ability to experience true relationship with God increases with our obedience. So as we look towards making ourselves completely and utterly in line with what God has for us, we see him laying out a table of blessings and prosperity. And I'm not talking about the, fat bank accounts, although that can be a part of it. I'm talking about the joy that you can have despite the circumstances, the friendships and the blessings that God sends into our life that they're not quantifiable. You can't put a price tag on a true friend who's closer than a brother, or the relationship with your husband and your children that's flourishing, or watching your children flourish in spite of negative circumstances, watching yourself be able to hold the line and prosper in whatever God has for you to do despite the circumstances. So his whole life is overflowing with blessings. One of my favorite scriptures besides this one is where God talks about the blessings chasing you down and overtaking you. And then in verse 6, it says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And God's goodness and mercy have always followed before, and we can cling to the fact that they will always flow before us in the future. All we have to do is dwell in the house of the Lord, behold the beauty of the Lord, inquire in his temple, and continue to long in our souls for the continual presence of God and communion with him as he takes care of everything else. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you. So that is the encouragement for today. Awesome. I love that scripture. So Psalm 23, if you're feeling something akin to what I was when my friend recommended it to me, I recommend it to you. Read it every day when you wake up and at night before bed. So it's the last thing you read before you go to bed, and just allow it to sink into you and to bless you. All right. So now, last night, the president was, he was just in rare form. He was working a room with half of the people in the room really hating him, openly hating him. He made them laugh. He made them chant USA, and he cracked jokes while he was doing it. And he stuck to the script mostly. I do have a copy from the White House of the remarks as given. So a transcript of the remarks as they were given, including the quips and ad-libs and everything. And I haven't had a chance to go over it because it just literally hit my email box a moment before we started the show. But suffice it to say, he was in it was kind of a zone where you get to where you know your haters are there, but you know you have something to say that's just phenomenal. And as he slid into that speech, it started off where I could tell the nerves were there. It appeared to me that he was settling in and he was nervous. But as he settled in and began to really share, it became clear to me that not only was he in the zone and in his element, but that there was something he had to say that was relevant for every person in that room, and therefore every American, because those are the representatives of all of us as Americans, and that no matter what happened in the course of that speech, he was confident in the message that he had. And it was one of unity, and it was so important for us to hear as a country. Also, he referred very comfortably to the Almighty and to what God has for us and our constitutionally guaranteed rights that are given to us by God, which I thought was just, again, it's wonderful to see and hear from the president. So I want you guys to hear the president saying the USA will never adopt socialism. And this is pretty amazing because he was talking right to AOC and Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders was redder than a tomato in the face, embarrassed and utterly flummoxed by the fact that the president chose to say this. Actually, we are not going to listen to that. No, we're not going to listen to that. We're going to actually listen to, we are. Number 4. I'm sorry, guys.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
2020, Trump 2020, baby. That's what that was. Now, let's just for 1 second, as we're going out of this segment, I have got to reiterate that it was so important for him to say that from the well of Congress to America, because we have millennials. The millennial generation is the most inclined towards socialism. They actually think it's something that could work in this country. We also have our colleges and universities, all the public ones, espousing Marxism and all of these really, they're culturally repugnant ideas that fly in the face of a constitutionally protected republic such as what we have here in America. Nobody fights and dies in a desert to get into a country that's a socialist country. Do you see people dying to get into Venezuela, dying to get into Guatemala, Cuba? No, they're all dive bombing out of there to come here. So if we know anything, it's that statement last night was the opening salvo and the president beginning to dismantle this new love and affection that Democrats seem to have with socialism. I believe he's going to use this tack and run on it in 2020. And if he does, it's going to be a winner for him. When we get back, we'll have John Miller. He's amazing. White House correspondent for CRTV. Stay right there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your health care. MediShare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. When our son Brendan was 12 years old, he pitched in one of the most bizarre baseball games I've ever seen. Brendan's team was winning by a significant margin. I suppose the umpire wanted to hurry up and get the game over, so he began to make the strike zone bigger for the other team and shrink it for our team. Before long, the fans picked up on this inequity and started calling names. That's never, ever justified. It got a little bit nasty. Then Brendan threw a pitch right down the middle, right over the heart of the plate, mid-thigh. Ball. Our catcher stood up and said, "That was a strike." Listen to what the umpire said. I heard it with my own ears. Of course it was a strike, but I just want to shut these people up. Now, most of us find that pretty awful, but sometimes we, too, are guilty of holding a double standard, aren't we? Acts chapter 15 is a prime example of this. The Jerusalem Council was convened over the whole issue of the Gentiles coming to Christ and whether they were required to observe the law. Peter had some powerful advice. Listen to what he said in verses 10 and 11. Now, therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing a yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? But we believe that we will be saved through the grace of the Lord Jesus, just as they will. Now, Peter's saying, cut it out. Don't add this extra stuff to the gospel. We need to be careful in our passion and zeal not to add things that God hasn't placed there. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Let's not confuse the profound simplicity of God's grace by adding our own personal double standard.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org. Join Crawford tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hello. Welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the show. He is so much fun to watch on CRTV. One of my favorites, honestly, and I don't say that a lot. And also that CRTV has expanded, and so it now includes the Blaze family, which is just, okay, how much more fun can you have? He's a White House correspondent for CRTV. His name's John Miller. John, thank you for joining the show.
It's great to be here, Stacey.
All right, let's talk about it. What'd you think about the State of the Union last night?
I thought it was, by the way, thank you for those compliments. I really appreciate that. I love listening to you. And yes, we are a huge family now. We've got all of the Blaze shows available. We've got all of what was formerly CRTV. So, if you want right-leaning content, we've got an incredible selection for you. But I thought the speech last night was, I thought it was great. And apparently most Americans agree, which was incredible. The poll numbers from CBS, which Stacey, had to drive them nuts to report that, because 76% of people viewed the speech as favorable. I mean, that just shows you that the left-wing class of politicians are really representing a fringe element of the country, and really most Americans are much more reasonable, much more down to earth. And I think you have Nancy Pelosi, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all of the lines that they didn't stand up for and clap for. The American people found those fine and actually appreciated it. So I thought it was a masterful speech. I thought that it was really well written. I thought it was really well delivered. Overall, I give him an A for the speech.
So, John, we're on the same page. I'm wondering, though, about a few specific moments. Like, did you notice that, first of all, Nancy Pelosi had a paper copy of the speech, which to me, it was just nothing but grandstanding, because every member of the, White House press corps, anybody who's on the list, had the embargoed speech hours before. So she didn't need a printout. She'd already had it hours before. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was as if she was checking him.
Bizarre? It's so bizarre to see her just looking at the speech like he's delivering the speech right in front of you. You don't need to look at the notes while he's reading it.
Well, it was as if she was saying, wait, he didn't say he was going to say that, but he stuck to the original speech. He just, there were a couple of ad libs, but for the most part, it was as prepared.
Correct. So I don't know what she was doing. She looked very confused, so I don't know where she was. I don't know if she had that cue card to remind her that, you're in front of America right now. So I honestly couldn't tell you, because she's at that point where you're like, is she all there? Or there's something up. So I thought that was very bizarre to see her doing that.
So what about her standing up? And then everyone else is sitting down and she's still kind of standing up. I was like, sit down. So I tweeted her a couple times, sit down, Nancy. She couldn't even figure out when she was supposed to be standing up and sitting down. And, my hand is up. If you're watching the live stream, you see my hand up. I have these flubs on our live stream sometimes where I'll have a sneezing fit, or I'll be like looking off to the side and we're live and I look at I'm still, I'm on camera, that kind of stuff. But I'm live streaming, my radio show from my little home studio here. She was in front of America in the well of Congress, just standing up, shuffling papers. It was crazy.
On one of the biggest speeches of the night, of the year. One of the biggest events of the year. She's sitting up there. You have to have it together. You can't be doing that, Nancy. And it's, Nancy was on the cards of, little notes that she had written to herself, when to stand, when to sit, when to clap, when not to.
So, okay, now, did you happen to catch how they were caught off guard? CBS and CNN had similar poll numbers, where 3/4 of Americans approving of the speech. So what they did was they tried to spin it as, well, only the Republicans were watching. But if you went to Twitter, you saw that there were tons of liberals tweeting about the speech and how much they hate Donald Trump. So clearly, lots of people watched it that weren't Republicans, weren't conservatives, whatever.
What a ridiculous thing to claim. Oh, it's popular. It must be only Republicans watching. First of all, that's like an impossible metric to measure in that sort of period of time, who was watching and what their political demographic was. Secondly, the idea that it was only, you're right, you go to Twitter, you see that everyone was watching the speech, and you look through the accolades, and you've got people from Vox, the far left commies at Vox News. They are, and that's Vox, VOX, not Fox, Vox, far left outlets. They are saying Trump is absolutely right on some of these issues. You have people at BuzzFeed saying Trump is actually bringing the country together. You've got Jonathan Karl saying, I can't believe it, but Trump is actually bringing the country together. All these people praising the speech. So the evidence is against anyone who's trying to claim it was only Republicans watching the speech.
Okay, so you totally broke that down, but you we can't talk today, John Miller of CRTV. We cannot talk today without addressing the ladies in white and how Trump had them on their feet yelling USA. I was like, where am I? Somebody pinch me. Am I awake? Are they really yelling for something that Donald Trump said? He was even surprised and said, you guys wouldn't yell like that for me. But anyway.
No, I mean, and I got to tell you, I thought that was a really inspiring moment, to be honest. I'm going to get soft for a sec and say, when you see Democrats and Republicans cheering for the same thing, I thought that was a great moment. Now, of course, he went straight to abortion after that, and then they sat down and were pissed off again. But there was a brief moment in there where I was like, oh, wow, the country is maybe there's a chance we can heal again.
Oh, so, okay, did you see the moment where he's talking about late-term abortion and this newfound idea that the Democrats have where a baby is born during the course of an abortion or something, or a woman goes into labor before they can have the abortion. The baby is born. The baby's out on a table, supposed to be swaddled in on a warming tray, getting ready to be, breastfed or something. And instead, according to Governor Northam, the mom and the doctor would simply discuss how to dispose of this. I guess they're still thinking it's a fetus, even though it's outside the womb. It's, the baby is alive and screaming and, basically breathing air like all of the rest of us do.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump described that.
People call that murder.
Right. I know. I was thinking the same thing. Last I checked, people get in huge, big trouble for, basically doing something negligent and their baby being injured, let alone intentionally, snuffing a baby out after it's born. But did you see that Ocasio-Cortez was sitting next to a lady? I'm not sure which legislator she is. I think she's new. She happened to be black, and she was explaining whatever it was that the president just said, kind of really, gesturing with her hand and looking angry. And Ocasio-Cortez looked perplexed, as if, what is he talking about, killing babies out? Like, it seemed like she was unaware that this was a story, and the lady was informing her. And I thought to myself, I wish I was there, because I could tell Ocasio-Cortez the truth, because she actually looked disturbed. Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to remember exactly how everyone reacted, and I know there was a lot of there's the three lawmakers. There was Ocasio-Cortez, and then she was next to a congresswoman from California and one from New York.
Okay.
And throughout the whole speech, they were looking at each other like, "Can we stand? Do we want to stand for killing babies?
What do we do?"
For trafficking? They couldn't figure it out, and it's like, it was incredible to watch, but it's interesting that it looked like she didn't know that this was a huge story, because it wasn't a huge story. Because what did they do? Of course, they covered up the horrors of Ralph Northam and what he was saying about, quote unquote, post-birth abortion, which again is just homicide. But they covered up that story really quickly, so it wasn't a big story on the left, because they instantly made the blackface and KKK photos the story of the week. That wasn't the real controversy. The real controversy was the abortion comments, but they really kind of cleverly made the big story and the big controversy the blackface photos, the KKK costume, the yearbook photos, so that they could avoid talking about the horrible comments that Northam made. So it's very possible that Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez was not aware that this was a huge deal, because the left successfully made it not a huge deal.
I mean, I genuinely, John, I actually think that's what happened, because I was watching it with some friends at a friend's house who, she happens to have that whole, we used to have it too, but we don't anymore. It's like a TiVo. I don't know what they call it nowadays, but you can rewind live television on it. And so,
you can rewind, yeah.
Yeah, so she rewound that section, and we listened to what the president said, because we were all hooping and hollering because we couldn't believe he had them on their feet. And then he segued right into abortion, and we were like, whoa, pump the brakes. So we rewound it back. And then we saw her do that twice. Like, we rewound it back twice and watched as he made the comment, and then Ocasio-Cortez turns, and her face is like, what is he talking about? And then she explains it, and instead of her just nodding and turning back to the front, she looks down as if to say, that doesn't sound right, and she's like, kind of nodding, kind of not, like, I'm not getting, like, something's going on here that I'm unaware of. And I would imagine, as often as I mock Ocasio-Cortez for her, the different things that she's got going on, crazy, crazy stuff. But there are plenty of millennials who are liberals and maybe even Marxists, but they're pro-life. Like, that is a thing nowadays for young people, because of science and technology and ultrasound, to be very much under the impression that a baby is a baby is a baby. And then they can also be for communism. Like that exists. And so I'm thinking maybe Ocasio-Cortez is not as, like, I don't know if she's as rabid as we maybe have thought.
Well, it's a human thing, isn't it? I mean, when you are a human being, and you hear this, it shouldn't be, your political views shouldn't kick in and say, well, politically, I believe, when you hear about something that, a life that is about to come out of the canal, that is about to be born, any human being with a soul should be able to say that's wrong. And, I'm pro-life, from conception, but even if you're not on that end of the pro-life spectrum, plenty of people believe that late-term abortions are just wrong. The number, I think, is 80% of women who are against a late-term abortion and want a ban on late-term abortion, and that number is actually growing. So, the pro-life movement is actually growing and is actually on the rise, and it's transcending politics because it is an issue of life. And I think that when you educate yourself about it, you learn, and it becomes harder and harder to paint it as women's productive rights.
So, that being said, and that was a pretty interesting segue too. Like we rewound that part back too because we weren't sure what he was going to say, and then all of a sudden he's like he was like moving on, and we were just like galloping to catch up. So there was that, and then there was also his moment about that we would never adopt socialism. Now I'm no hiding anything here, John. Full disclosure, everybody knows I'm Stacey on the right. I'm like this in my off hours as well. I don't do politics and radio in my off hours, but I do, like, when maybe my girlfriends get together, it's all conservative chicks. And when we were watching it last night, we had the brie and the little St. Louis toast, which looked like teeny tiny little pieces of toast, and you spread the brie on them, sliced apples, like 4 different kinds of cheese. They were drinking wine. I was drinking Perrier water. We were sitting up enjoying ourselves. And so we would be like pointing and screaming at the TV at what he had just said and then have to rewind it back because we'd made so much noise we missed it. And we almost missed him saying, America will never, we all fell silent. And he just was like, we'll never be a socialist nation. I could have run up and just basically picked that TV up and NFL, touchdowned it. I could have just dunked that TV on the ground. I was so excited about him addressing that issue, which I didn't expect. How did you take that moment? It was so awesome.
I mean, it was an amazing moment. I support a lot of Donald Trump's policies. I think I fell in love with him when he said that. And the incredible thing, though, is that even I believe 10 years ago, maybe not even that long ago, that would have been a line that had the entire chamber on their feet. Mm-hmm. Everyone would have stood up cheering for that line. And you saw the Democrat caucus, there was a lot of them that sat because they are socialists. It's an incredible thing that line is not something that everyone in America can get behind. It's incredible that there are actually people, because there's actually socialists in the government who want to go the way, who think that free market capitalism, who think that freedom is not worth defending, and we're actually defending when Donald Trump said that we'll never be a socialist nation.
Crazy. It was
I
crazy.
found that incredible.
And Bernie Sanders' face as red as a tomato, just sitting there. If he could have said anything, he would have jumped up and walked out slowly, because I'm sure he's not running at his age, but he would have definitely stomped out in a very gentle, soft way. He would have stomped out of there if he could have, but he just couldn't get out of there. So, John.
And that was a brilliant thing. They had new cameras, Stacey, there that gave close-ups of their face, yes. And that just provided so much color, because you could actually see the veins bulging yes. above their eyeballs yes. when he said stuff that made them mad. And it was just whoever's decision in the pool feed to put those cameras up close in their face, I want to shake that person.
It was so great. So my last one here, because there were so many great moments, and we could probably, if we had snacks, we could sit up and talk about this for like 2 hours. But so John, what about when the president was like, he canceled the INF treaty, right? And he was talking about that, and then he just out of nowhere again was like, and if we need to, we'll have more weapons than anybody else. I don't even remember exactly what he said. All I knew was I was ready to take a guitar and smash it like I was on a heavy metal band. It was awesome.
No, it was awesome. And there were so many awesome moments in the season. That was an incredible moment, because you know that just drove him mad. And then my other favorite moment, and this is actually a little more controversial, my other favorite moment was when he said, and we will not put up with pointless political investigations. And Nancy Pelosi behind him literally let out a full, not even a subtle one, a full open-mouth eye roll.
Yeah.
It was just, he put that line in there just to elicit that reaction, and he fell right into the trap.
It was fantastic. I love that he addressed it right there, because Americans don't want endless investigations either. It's a waste of taxpayer money, and it's really distracting. And, I have to say, John, I was just expecting it to be good. I wasn't expecting it to be outstanding, like, almost like a mix of a comedy show, one of the best speeches you've ever heard, with a little bit of rock and roll mixed in. That's what it felt like.
It really was. And the ending, I mean, I said this on my show. Donald Trump, he's to the point. He's funny. He speaks well. style. But I got chilled at points in that speech, especially towards the end. It was remarkably written. Just a masterful speech. I thought it really was one of the best speeches I've heard from an American president in my lifetime.
It was his best, certainly, so far in his presidency. And John, thank you. I hear the music. I've so enjoyed recapping this with you. You would have been totally in your wheelhouse. If you'd hung out with us last night, you would have had so much fun. We were sitting there. It was so much fun, laughing and giggling and rewinding.
I was stuck at the Capitol with all the liberal news people. So
well, you were
not
working.
happy with my take on it, but that's where I was. I would have much rather been with
you. Were working. You were in the right spot. We were kind of goofing off, but it was still fun. Thank you, John, for joining us. White House correspondent for CRTV. You're awesome. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you again soon. You know what, guys? We'll be back with more right after this, so you keep it here.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Why do bad things happen? I don't know. Why did our son Jamie die? I don't know. But I do know that God has the answers. I know He loves me, and I know He has a plan for my life and for yours. We live in a lost and hurting world. Pressing on to help others who are hurting is all I can do. I'm certain it's what God wants us to do, and He will use it all for good because He loves us. God's Son died too, but God willingly allowed Christ to die on that cross so that He could restore sight to the blind, heal broken hearts, and bring His children to Him for all eternity.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
I've often said euthanasia follows abortion like night follows day. On the heels of New York passing an abortion bill that exceeds Roe v. Wade in human carnage, a bill to legalize assisted suicide was recently introduced. The proposed legislation doesn't require a waiting period or a New York residence for those being intentionally killed. As a result, the Big Apple won't be the only tourist destination. The state would become a go-to place for death by suicide. And there won't be any of those pesky, revealing statistics to keep track of the number killed because doctors are required to list an illness as the cause of death, not assisted suicide. Abortion and assisted suicide, the lethal bookends of a society that doesn't respect innocent human life.
Like us on Facebook at Life Issues and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
From America's election headquarters.
What to do about a healthcare system that is still a major source of angst.
I'm glad you asked.
Early Democratic frontrunner Kamala Harris' position on Medicare for All, which calls for a massive expansion of an otherwise popular program that is now primarily for older Americans.
Everyone has access to health care, period. And that's what will happen under Medicare for All.
But that idea has been championed on the left by everyone from Elizabeth Warren to Bernie Sanders. It's no secret that President Trump has railed against government-expanded health care for years. But even on the left, it has become a divisive issue. And it's one of the reasons that the liberal former CEO of Starbucks is thinking about mounting an independent run for the White House.
To come out with a suggestion that we're going to eradicate the insurance industry is just, it's so false.
In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Just in from our CBS News instant poll here following the President's State of the Union, 76% of speech watchers said they approved of what they heard. 72% said they approved of the President's ideas for immigration.
Yeah. So this idea that walls are immoral or medieval, it's not one shared by the majority of Americans. And I think it's really important that they delineated that they were talking to, polling, asking questions of people who actually watched the speech. Because any hardcore leftist partisan is going to say the speech sucked and it was horrible. But any person who really, really has an interest in understanding what the president is putting forward and getting it straight from his mouth would just watch the speech. And it's the reason why Nancy Pelosi made it it had to be contingent on them reopening the government, because she knew if he had a chance to make the case to the American people, the Democrats would be forced by their constituents to deal with him on the wall, which they have no intention of doing, by the way. No intention. But if the constituents turn against them, if they get some more traction on this, I think they might move. And yeah, so we're going to take calls, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. I also want to just really quickly, I want to listen to the president calling out the New York Democrats, calling on Congress to end partial birth abortions at the State of the Union. It's number 3.
There could be no greater contrast to the beautiful image of a mother holding her infant child than the chilling displays our nation saw in recent days. Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. These are living, feeling, beautiful babies who will never get the chance to share their love and their dreams with the world. And then we had the case of the governor of Virginia, where he stated he would execute a baby after birth. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in a mother's womb.
Yeah, and that was also where Ocasio-Cortez turned to her cohort and was asking about what the president had said about, killing a baby after it's born. I tend to believe that not every Democrat has that kind of hate in their heart for living human beings, and that this idea that a woman can decide without the consent of the father of the baby that a baby needs to die this side of the womb or on the other side of the womb. We're talking semantics here. The idea that women have the right to do that, and that if a doctor fails to abort a baby in time, she gets to decide after the baby's born whether or not it lives or dies, flies in the face of the women's rights movement, of the National Organization for Women, of what feminism is supposed to espouse. If they're cheering for all of the women who've been ushered into Congress, how can they not cheer for protecting little baby girls and baby boys who happen to survive an abortion, who definitely have just thousands of families lined up waiting to take them? Why would that be an option after they're born? And by extension, why is it now an option before they're born? If that baby is viable, why is it that we can abort it here in this country? It's a moral issue, and it's a heart issue, and it's a national issue that we will pay for. We're already paying for it, but we will ultimately come to a place of utter judgment and wrath poured out on us if we don't figure our way out of this thing. And remember, it's by hook or by crook. And I'm not talking about illegal activity here. I'm talking about doing whatever it takes, going to places we don't want to go to, uncomfortable places, not harming anyone. I know there's some liberal out there already comprising an email to me. You're advocating for violence. No, I'm not. I never advocate for violence. But I do advocate for us to take every civic measure that we can to put a stop to this, because we do fear God and we do want to avoid the judgment. That's why. Not because, I actually don't care about what liberals feel about this. Their feelings are irrelevant. It's the killing that has to stop. And if it could just save one life, ... And that's my answer to anybody who disagrees with what I just said there. Let's go to the phones. So exciting. Randy, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Hey.
Hey.
Okay. About the State of the Union, all those women in white last night, I was a little, I must have read it wrong, because there was a Muslim in amongst them, and I was figuring she might commit jihad, and I guess the rest of those women in white were the 32 virgins.
I don't know. I don't know what they were trying to.
Am I wrong about that?
I don't know what they were trying to pull off, Randy. I have no idea. I think it was they wanted a spectacle. They wanted to show solidarity, but it came off all wrong, because when they were sitting, when they should have been standing, it was all the more obvious because they were all wearing white. And again, I don't agree with people being allowed to wear headgear inside the well of Congress. I don't care what religion you're practicing. You shouldn't be allowed to wear your headgear inside the well of the Congress. Thank you for calling, Randy. Let's go to William in Oklahoma. Hey, William, thanks for calling in today.
All right, thank you for taking my call. I think the president gave a speech, and he used such simple words that even casual Artez could understand what he was saying when he said about the abortion. I think that there may be hope for her yet. When she finally learns what's right, she might become a Republican. And my second comment is the review that was given by Abrams. It was the same old rhetoric, same old empty accusation when she said about the truth. What does she mean about the truth? What was she talking about? It was this empty, accusations about the whole thing. But I thought his speech was this right on.
I did too. Thank you, William. Thank you for that. And you know what? William just brought up something amazing that we haven't considered when I think instead of us working hard and talking about Ocasio-Cortez, which we have done here on this show, instead of everybody talking about her, we should be praying that she would, as he just said, come to know the truth and come over to our side. Not because she's so special or anything, but because she could be won over. Just like I was a Democrat when I was her age. Well, I switched over a little bit before she did, because I think she's about to turn 30, and I was in the process of switching over in the middle of my 20s. But come on, people. Anyone can be turned. Anyone can be brought over. That's what we should pray for. I'm going to get to all of your calls before we end this segment. Jason, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Yeah, I really enjoy your show. Praise the Lord for you there.
Thank you.
I work for a governmental agency. I'd rather not say, but there's several African Americans here that after last night's State of the Union say they're not going to vote Democrat no more.
Really?
So
did they say why?
I don't know. They're really, really hardcore Democrats, and they say after that they're not voting Democrat anymore.
Wow. So did they say what changed their mind or?
He said for him, when they didn't stand for killing children, that he just can't go with that. He just can't go with that.
See, this is the beauty of him waiting. Because remember, I don't know if you heard me on the air. I was like, he should come to Missouri and give the speech. He should do a round of speeches around the country. But the president was wiser than that, and he waited and gave the opportunity to have it in the well of Congress, because I think he knew that was when everyone would be watching. And I hope that what you just shared, Jason, is happening all over the country. And it's not about politics or left or right. It's about right or wrong. And if it's the issue of infanticide that brings people to their senses, so be it. I just want people to be on the right side of that. Thank you for calling. I appreciate that comment. Norman, thank you so much for calling the show today.
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to hear from you. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, I had to call you up and tell you I liked about 95% of the speech.
Really? Awesome. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and if he keeps talking like he was talking last night, I think he could win over a lot of Democrats if he can just stay disciplined and stick with the subject and the things that he needs to be talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously, good policies. I agree with him. Some areas on the border, you need some barriers. Absolutely, I think everybody knows that. I think, but see, the way some of the Democrats responded to him last night was wrong, but it was the way some Republicans responded to Barack Obama.
Yeah, true.
I mean,
true.
Even to the point where one of them called him a lie in the well of the house.
Which was unacceptable. It was unacceptable. Absolutely. No, you're right.
Yeah, it was unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And some of the silly stuff that Democrats did last night, but here's what's going to happen with those silly Democrats. They're going to figure out that nobody's going to take you serious unless you start acting like you got sense. Mm-hmm. And I think what's going to happen to them, a lot of them are going to learn what they need to learn and understand and do a lot better. Mm-hmm. And I really do believe that the president could win a lot of Democrats over if he would continue to speak like he spoke last night. portion of his speech, to me, he should have left out when he said that, wars and politics and investigations will stop the economic program. Everybody knows what he's saying, don't investigate. Well, clearly, and I don't know whether it's him or not, but clearly there were some laws broken. There's some things that need to be investigated. And number two, some of the Democrats are just doing to him what they did to Hillary. They investigated her right on up through her election, her run for president. So that's what they do to each other. I understand that. But there was some laws broken. And there are some things that need to be investigated. I hope that the president had nothing to do with it because the country needs to be able to move on.
Well, you know what, Pastor Norman, I got to say, I agree with much of what you said. I mean, I don't actually believe the president broke any laws. I believe if he had, they would have already exposed that. They would have come to conclusion with the investigation immediately because they would want that to be out before the election that just happened, the midterm. But I do think when we're talking about the tenor, you mentioned if he speaks the same as he did last night, I think that was the part that really surprised me, was that he seems to be developing a very presidential way of giving a speech, and he accesses that at certain moments. And when he does, his approval ratings go up. He gets a lot of traction in the media, and he wins over a lot of people like yourself, the way you've been talking here. I hope that he continues to do that. And again, obviously, I want to see the president reelected, but it's not so much about the right-left side of it. It's about trying to get people off of the path of destruction that I currently think they're on. And so, great comments. Thank you so much for calling the show today. Let's go the call lines are still open. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. I want to go to one more phone call, and then we're going to talk about India partners. And so, Jake, thank you so much for calling.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Stacy.
Sure.
I watched it last night, and I'm a preacher, and I gave him 100%. He spoke well. I'm like, very well. And me and my wife, we were sitting there watching it. I got her tuned in on you now, and I'm trying to get all my family members tuned in on you because I have learned a lot since I found this station. And I tell you this right here, and I asked my wife, I'm a black guy, my wife is white. I said, what do those people look like in that white baby? She said, they look like the KKK sitting up in there.
So you're not the only one to make that comparison. There's a meme running around where they have the hoods on with the outfits, and they said, the Democrats started the KKK, and now here they are starting this whole, another white outfit trend. I think it backfired on them, quite honestly. And I just think that if you look at the presidential candidates on the Democratic side, they did not wear the outfits. They actually dressed to kind of let themselves stand apart, which was a smart thing to do. So let me tell you really quickly, we are trying to do 1,000 days of safety, and we are well into that goal for today. And each day of safety costs $7.08. We got the graphic up. If you're watching on the live stream, you can see that there. Rescue a Child provided 1 day of safety by giving now at 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or going to afr.net. These are kids whose moms work in the red light district in Mumbai, India. And a day of safety means that they can eat and rest and be away from that area in a safe house that's provided by India Partners. And American Family Radio, as a part of our ministry, we are partnered with India Partners to give our listeners the opportunity to provide these days of safety for these kids. They would be given food and shelter and a warm bed to sleep in away from that area. And their moms are, assured of their safety so that their moms aren't stressed as well. And these are women who are living in abject poverty, and the kids are in that too. And this ministry is providing them with food and shelter and warmth and care and the gospel. And so we just would love it if you would provide 1 day of safety, $7.08. I like to liken it to a couple of cups of fancy coffee. And if you look at the live stream, you can see that I have my little fancy cup of Nordstrom coffee here. Yes, I was there today. I'm not going to lie. I was there. I had to go there. So you are hearing the music. Citizens, thank you for making your home at American Family Radio. If you're leaving us now, God bless from the heartland. If you're not, you have One News Now, news and information up next, and then more Stacey on the right. Keep it here.
Family Talk.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit EngageMagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump touted the historically low unemployment rates of minorities in his State of the Union address. Dan Celia of Financial Issues takes exception to the fact that Democrats did not stand to applaud the announcement.
If you are in that category and you're listening, do you understand they can't stand for that? Because if they stand for that, they have no party left. That is, in fact, the base that they are depending upon to grow a bigger government and get more people sustained and depending on government, not on the private sector, not on their hard work, not on their will.
A black conservative activist and Republican leader says President Trump's State of the Union address resounded with the American people.
During his address, President Trump called on Washington to reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution. He warned emboldened Democrats that ridiculous partisan investigations into his administration and businesses could hamper a surging American economy. The president touted his achievements and vowed that the United States will never be a socialist country. Nicole Bennett is a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network and serves as chairman of the Charles County Republican Central Committee, the first black woman to lead such a committee in Maryland history. She says Trump's speech was for the American people.
When he spoke about coming together as a nation and putting aside revenge politics, he knew full well that the Democrats are not bringing that to the table. That's not who they are. However, that resounded with the American people. This is him saying, listen, we can move past that, we can work together, but we have to try. It's an olive branch, and if they don't grab it, it's going to be squarely their fault.
And Bennett says it's a sad day when the President of the United States has to say we're not going to be a socialist nation.
It really boggles your mind how people can think that we've come this far, the greatest nation on the planet, far and away, that suddenly we would walk away from what we know to be true and good for not only ourselves, but for the rest of the people who live on the planet.
And Bennett thinks Trump did very well setting himself up for 2020. I'm Chad Groening.
The future of Virginia's governor and lieutenant governor's time in office remains uncertain, as both men are entrenched in scandals, with people calling for their resignations. Eben Brown reports.
Amidst the political turmoil sparked by an old yearbook photo purportedly depicting Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam in blackface, a photograph for which he first apologized then later denied was of him, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax could be investigated on charges of sex assault. His accuser, now named as Scripps College professor Vanessa Tyson, claims Fairfax forced himself on her in 2004 while both were attending the Democratic National Convention in Boston. Eben Brown, Fox News.
A former pastor heads to trial in Ohio accused of child sex trafficking. Jeff Manasso reports.
Jury selection begins today in the case against Anthony Haynes, who's accused of grooming a 14-year-old girl for sex and introducing her and other underage girls to two other Toledo area pastors. In a child rape and sex trafficking case, the other pastors have already pled guilty and are awaiting sentencing. Prosecutors also say that Haynes' wife and stepdaughter are facing charges after allegedly abducting the victim in January and warning her against testifying. Haynes faces up to life in prison if convicted. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
One airline is looking to lure more big spenders. Lillian Wu explains.
United Airlines looking to upgrade its number of high-fare flyers by adding premium seats on some key routes, part of an industry trend. United, in what some analysts see as a direct challenge to Delta, announcing plans to add more than 1,600 premium seats to about 250 aircraft, such as some Boeing 767-300ER jets, where the expansion will shrink the economy section. Also adding more first-class seats to some Airbus planes, and by the end of the year, it hopes to fly new 50-seat Bombardier jets between Chicago and smaller markets. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Chris Brooks.
We cannot underestimate the responsibility of evangelism. That is why shows like this, Equipped, which is committed to equipping you every day to live, share, and defend your faith, are extremely important, because anyone who does not confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is outside of God's saving grace.
Equipped. Weekdays at noon Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The agenda I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. It's the agenda of the American people. We must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in a mother's womb.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, yeah. Find out more about what we do on Twitter and Instagram at Stacy on the Right. Hit the follow button. Share it with your friends. The way the show grows is organically through you guys saying, you know what, I like this. And as one caller said last hour, turning your friends and family onto it, following on Instagram or Twitter, whichever mode is your favorite. We're all over the place, YouTube. And we do that because we know some people just don't do Facebook. And I get it. I totally get it. If I wasn't already so entrenched, I'd probably be right there with you. Then there are people who don't do YouTube. So we just try to make sure that we have something available to you on all of those spaces so you can pick your poison and plug in and you're good to go. Poison being a euphemism for what we're doing here, which is awesome. So now, second hour of the show. We have a great guest for you, Curtis Houck. He's a managing editor for Newsbusters. You know, we love Newsbusters because they watch all the TV that we can't watch because we have lives, and they keep track of the mentions and the subject matter and the topics that the media avoids covering. And I did have, some interesting thoughts about some of the superlatives that the president used last night, and I want to get to that. But first, I want to go to the phones. And I love it when people hold over from hour one. I love that. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's first go to Scott. Scott, thanks for calling in today.
Thank you so much. Just real quick, I'm curious if anyone else noticed that when representatives would start applauding both Republican and Democrat, Nancy Pelosi would hold up her hand behind the president and kind of wave the Democrats down, like, stop applauding. If you look, when the president turns right at one point to face the right side of the well, and she clearly does it several times throughout his speech to tell him, hey, simmer down. He doesn't need these applause. He doesn't need our support. Regardless, I guess, of what they're thinking about what he's saying. They're like, clearly what he's saying is making sense, and it sounds really good, regardless of what side of the aisle I'm on. But I've got our brainless leader, Nancy Pelosi, up front telling us to simmer down and not support the president.
I didn't notice that. And it might have been because I was so busy eating grapes and brie and spreading my little tiny crackers with cheese. But I did notice her kind of looking like, she literally looked like she was mouthing things to people at one point. And there was so much to take in. It was like a sporting event. You know how it is when you, even if you don't go live, if you're watching on TV, sometimes a football game or a basketball game, there's so much to take in because you're watching the crowd and you're watching the game and you can miss stuff. And I feel like the State of the Union was like that. Like we could almost, because it was an hour, we could almost go back and watch it again tonight and catch a whole bunch of stuff that we missed, especially the reactions that you're talking about. it wouldn't surprise me at all. In fact, if you say that's what you saw, I'm pretty sure that's what you saw, because she is a control freak. And she doesn't want people having their natural reaction. She wants them to behave in the plan that she laid out beforehand, because I'm sure she told them he's going to try to get you to agree with him on things, and we can't let him have even 1 inch. We can't let him win. But I do think people have a natural, like I saw, did you see Debbie Wasserman Schultz? She was standing up when the people in white were sitting down. Did you see that? It was about,
yes, I did.
What was the subject? What were they talking about? Honestly, I'm going to have to go back and watch it a second time. I can't remember what the subject was, but she was standing up, clapping. And some Democrats who weren't in white were also standing up clapping. I think it was about the jobs numbers for African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. All of those groups are having higher employment, or, the unemployment rates are really low, and they're historic lows. And I think she was standing up for that, which is kind of, that's good, actually.
Yes. Yeah, it is. But, it's not what's coming out of the mouth at the front of the room and Nancy Pelosi, so they're not going to stand by and applaud it unless she gives her blessing to it.
I think that's funny. Well, you know what? Thank you for pointing that out and for calling the show today. Have a great day, Scott. All right, let's go to Jerry. Thank you so much, Jerry, for calling the show.
Hey, Stacey, how are you today?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was just going, my 3 thoughts real quick. Okay. Where, first thing, I think he seriously should have just dropped the mic at the end of that speech.
That was good.
That's it. Done. We're good. It was one of my most favorite presidential speeches I think I've ever sat in front of and listened to.
Me too.
And then I made my 15-year-old sit down with me and watch it. And he reluctantly did it. It was quite a bit of argument with it. And but before it was over with, he loved it. He was so excited and so glad. So I think it's important that we get our kids involved. We listen to the AFA radio in the car every day. And he listens to Sandy in the morning. We catch you in the afternoon on the way home. So he hears it, but I just find it very important that you need to hear it from the mouth of, and not just take opinions of a lot of times too. So
that is
really
good advice.
Hear.
Yeah, Jerry, I'm glad you're sharing that.
Thank you.
I think it's important what you're saying there. And we do the same thing at our house. I try to find a balance because I am so politically, that this is my job. My husband is not as, he's conservative, but he's not as, he reads news stories, he keeps up with the news, but he can't be as involved as I am. But he definitely, like, if there's an issue and it comes up at dinner, sometimes the kids will say, Mom, I saw a story, because they watch their own channels on YouTube, their own hosts that they like. And they'll say, I saw this story. What did you think about it? Did you talk about this on your show? I'm like, oh, yeah, or no, I haven't actually covered it. What do you think? You'd be amazed at how much they pick up when you're basically laying the table. You're saying, we got Sandy Rios in the morning, we got, afternoon programming, AFR, and you're letting them hear that. And then that just kind of informs their perspective and they make up their own mind. But I think it's a brilliant way of getting some of it into them, because they're going to get some news and information anyway. So you might as well make it from the Christian worldview. And we do that so well here at AFR. I think Sandy Rios' program is outstanding. And it's really not about what I think, because she's been on their air and been successful on her radio show for a very long time. And that's because she provides great content. And we have that all day long here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And so I'm really excited that that you're doing that. Thank you so much for doing that. So now I want you to hear some audio, and this is super, super telling. After last night, speaking of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she says that President Trump is rejecting socialism because he feels himself losing on the issues. Now, I don't know how she gets that from what we heard last night. I heard a president who was very sure and strong about how things are going under his presidency. She heard someone who's running away from socialism because his stuff doesn't work. I don't know how she got that, but here she is. It's number 5.
Well, I think that he needs to do it because he feels like he feels himself losing on the issues. Every single policy proposal that we have adopted and presented to the American public has been overwhelmingly popular, even some with a majority of Republican voters supporting what we're talking about. When we talk about a 70% marginal tax tax rate on incomes over $10 million. 60% of Americans approve it. 70% of Americans believe in improved and expanded Medicare for all. A very large amount of Americans believe that we need to do something about climate change and that it is an existential threat to ourselves and to our children. And so I think he sees himself losing on the issues. He sees himself losing on the wall, on the southern border, and he needs to grasp at an ad hominem attack. And this is his way of doing it. But what we really need to realize that what is happening is that this is an issue of authoritarian regime versus democracy. And in order for him to try to, dissuade or throw people off the scent of the trail, he has to really make and confuse the public. And I think that that's exactly what he's trying to do.
Okay, look, we know that the president was not trying to confuse people last night. If anything, he was so even-keeled and down to earth. He literally numbed down his presentation style because he's much more bombastic. And I just think it's so interesting that Pastor Norman, he was highlighting that when he was giving his, analysis of what he saw last night. Pastor Norman picked up on it too. I felt like we were kind of playing off of it too last night when we were talking. It's a sentiment that I've heard repeated over and over again, that the presentation style that the president brought about last night was clearly intended to remove. So in other words, you lessen yourself so the message can rise up. And this is a speaking technique that experts use, where sometimes you want a speech to be as much about you, the presenter, as you do about the content. And so the two dovetail together, and you can be pointed and expressive, and it helps elevate the message when you do that. Other times, when you're speaking to an audience that's not as friendly to you, you have to basically shrink back the presenter and let the information be the star. That's what we saw last night from President Trump. And again, if he had had a different presentation or if the content wasn't good, I would have said that. And I actually did an interview on, I can't remember the name of it right now, and I'll look it up here for you while we're talking. I was on with Rick Unger, who he happens to be a pretty hardcore Democrat, but he's really well accomplished. And his claim to fame for me personally is that he taught me how to ride the subway in New York City, because I was going to, actually was doing the Megyn Kelly file back when she was on Fox News. She had an audience panel and I'd been invited to participate. And it was when the police brutality was a huge issue and Black Lives Matter was protesting across the country. And so I flew to New York to be on the Kelly file. And during the day before my actual hit at Fox, I went over to Newsmax back when they had studios in New York City. And I hung out at Newsmax for the day and I did like 4 of their shows, just like panels. And while I was there, I did a program that Rick Unger used to have on Newsmax. And so that was my first time meeting him. But we'd actually met, actually it wasn't my first time. Let me correct that. We met the year before at Talkers. And we were heading over to Newsmax, and he taught me how to ride the subway that time. So I met him again and was on his program again that next year for the Kelly file. But be that as it may, he taught me how to ride the subway. So he has a really good program that he does. It's a podcast. It's called The Pod Complex with Rick Unger, Real Talk 9:10 a.m. And it's a show that he actually does with Michael Steele, I believe. It's interesting. Michael Steele is sometimes the co-host, but it's Rick Unger's podcast. And we were on today, not because we agree on a lot, except that we agree that each of us is much more open to discussing things from the other perspective. I love to hear Rick's analysis because he's an economist and he's very, very smart on the economy. He doesn't agree with President Trump, but he doesn't have Trump derangement syndrome, which means that he and I can talk and we can discuss President Trump. We can talk about different issues. And that's what we did this morning. But it was something interesting that he was talking about the Democrats. He is a Democrat, and he says that, the Democrats are losing with working class voters. And I pointed out that it's not so much that they're losing with them as that they have some people in their party who despise them. And he said, well, that's not all Democrats. And I said, sure, it's not. But it's some of the biggest mouthpieces say the most horrible things about white people. And when you talk about white people like that, it turns them off and makes them think there's nothing that you have for them in your platform, your party to offer. And so not like I'm trying to help the Democrats win votes here, but we were discussing this allegation that the president lies all of the time because he talked about his inauguration crowd size being so great, and because last night he said they'd cut more regulations than any other president in the entirety of their term. Now, I don't remember that part of the speech. I'm telling you, it was pandemonium in that living room. We were having so much fun. But I don't think that those are important enough issues for us to deem the president a liar, as opposed to he's very flowery in his descriptions of his accomplishments. But there are more important issues to discuss. When we get back, we'll have Curtis Houck of Newsbusters. Stay right there.
The Ministry of Preborn meets abortion-minded women right where they are. When a young mom sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
This mom chose life for her baby.
She's been such a joy. Her name even means rebirth and sort of being raised up from the ashes. I now see my daughter, and I cannot imagine my life without my happy, lovely, joyful, smart baby, and I'm so grateful.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
One of the hot ideas in the progressive world is the Green New Deal. It's a term reminiscent of FDR's New Deal of the 1930s, but is even bolder in its approach. For the next year or so, we will hear Democratic candidates talk about it and perhaps even include it in the 2020 Democratic platform. If people take a moment to sit down and read it, they would reject it, but since most of us don't have the time, let me summarize 2 key points. First, the plan would cut military spending by at least half and withdraw U.S. troops from overseas. Let me give you the numbers. We have 1.3 million active duty troops, another 865,000 reserves, and another 680,000 civilian employees. Cutting spending by at least half would put at least 1 million military personnel out of work. And also, do we really think withdrawing troops from South Korea or the Middle East is a good idea? Second, the plan would require the eventual elimination of all fossil fuels and even nuclear power. Natural gas produces 32% of America's energy. Oil and liquid natural gas produces an additional 28%. Coal provides nearly 18%, and nuclear power produces another 10%. In about a decade, we're supposed to replace 88% of America's current energy sources. Americans might also want to examine the history of the New Deal. Jonah Goldberg reminds us that FDR campaigned to fight the Great Depression with industrial policies and a militarized workforce. The New Deal then, and certainly the Green New Deal now, would have to increase government power over people and their liberties. Some politicians might like the sound of a Green New Deal, but I can assure you that you wouldn't like what these policies would do to you and your lifestyle. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. I don't know what kind of weather you're experiencing. Apparently in D.C. it's like 60 degrees. Here in the Midwest, we are experiencing 30 degrees and rain. Before I get to complaining, I have to remember that we had negative 24. And so I'm fine with it. I was outside today like it was nobody's business. And I will be outside again. I will no longer be housebound, even though the sun is not out, because I've seen negative 24 and I stared it in the face and survived to tell the tale another day. So, we're going to live. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Curtis Houck, managing editor for Newsbusters. Curtis, thanks for joining us today.
No problem, Stacey.
So let's talk about that speech last night. What'd you think?
Oh my gosh, the media coverage just, it's almost become predictable at this point that these people are just going to lose their minds.
Okay, so I saw the reactions last night so I was at a friend's house who she has all the cable, like all of it. She has all the channels. She even has that TiVo thing that you can rewind live television. So we just had a ball last night. It was like the Super Bowl, but for conservative chicks with Brie, and they were drinking wine, and it was super fun. I thought that it was like they watched a different speech, especially Van Jones's comments. He sounded almost deranged, which he's normally a little more even-keeled, even though he's somewhat of a Marxist.
Right, exactly, compared to some other people that they have at CNN. But let me just read this quote. I see it very differently, because he was talking about Rick Santorum, about reaching the president's attempts to reach across the aisle yesterday. I see it very differently. I saw the speech as psychotically incoherent speech with cookies and dog poop. He tried to put together in the same speech these warm kind of things about humanitarianism and caring about children. At the same time, he is demonizing people who are immigrants in a way that was appalling, end quote. Well then, I mean, it was so crazy what was, you were seeing. You had that with Van Jones. You had people just, you had Brian Williams upset that the president was talking in graphic terms about abortion. It was so weird. You had the CBS This Morning crew on Colbert talking about how they were disturbed by the president talking about the wall. John King on CNN upset that they didn't talk about climate change. There were just so many things wrong last night. Those of us that were here late last night, worked for Newsbusters, we could do no wrong when it came to deciding what we wanted to write about.
I don't know what the atmosphere must have been like over there at Newsbusters, but you guys have a really fun crew, so I can imagine you guys laughing a little bit at the, I just, what, dog, poo, and cookies? What does that even mean? That's not an analogy I know.
How did he think of that? Right. How did he come up with those two things? Was he trying to come up with, when you try to think of passwords, you try to think of a bunch of random things to throw together as a password for stuff like your bank account? I don't know. It was just so bizarre. You had that, and then it was, again, you would just, and contrast that with what you saw, how the media reacted to the Stacey Abrams speech.
Which was horrible. It was just bad.
You had the crowd behind her, which was really weird. But they were fuzzy in the background, and they didn't clap or anything. They clapped, until the end. It was just really kind of weird, But meanwhile, NBC also said that the Trump speech was incoherent when he wasn't talking about the wall. And then when it came to Stacey Abrams, they were all saying, she didn't let the Republicans get away with the shutdown. She let them have it. Andrea Mitchell was saying she was a very effective speaker who scolded the president, and she made a really important statement about the shutdown. And then she added that she hit a lot of strong points. Again, it's just completely different worlds, two different planets that we're on. Again, it's just such a mess here, and you have people last night on MSNBC, Jason Johnson saying that, Stacey Abrams did win that election. It's just that the Republicans cheated, of course. So somehow the actual governor of Georgia was giving the response last night. Again, it's
right.
just, I have no idea how, again, it's just crazy.
Okay. So there's so much to talk about, and so you guys sent out a thing this morning, which is how I was able to connect up with you and snag you for the show this afternoon, and thank you for that. I was looking down your list of because you guys had so much. It was like a buffet of awesome followed by a buffet of crazy, of the State of the Union, and then the response by Stacey Abrams. And I'll give her that she was a strong speaker. If you look at the marks of someone who's speaking well. Her delivery was good. The backdrop was weird. It actually lit her in a way that was almost like there was a weird glow around the edges of her, like she'd been cut and pasted into the frame. But be that as it may, for what she had to share, if you ignore the content, she delivered it well. But there's something more to it than that, which was her insistence on acting as if she was I don't want to say worthy, but of the stature to scold the president. Like, she made those remarks and they knew she was going to make the remarks. I'm sure they had a copy of her speech beforehand, and they termed her criticism of some of what President Trump discussed as a scolding. Well, only people who scold you are people who are above you. So parents scold kids, teachers scold kids, a boss can scold an employee. Why would they use that terminology between a failed gubernatorial candidate who is just now becoming nationally prominent and the president of the United States?
Well, I think it goes back to the point that Democrats are still struggling to find someone to be the face of their party after the 2016 election. They want to beat up on President Trump, but for like it or not, even never-Trumpers will admit that, he is the head of the Republican Party. No question about it. There on certain issues, there may be different leaders, but overall, because he's the president, he's the leader of the party. And Maury Gay from the New York Times, editorial board member in the 1 a.m. Eastern hour last night, kind of made the point that she admitted that she misses Barack Obama because Stacey Abrams reminded her of a Democrat who was able to rally the troops and inspire them, whatever that means.
Right, but
us conservatives.
So, okay, I get it. I know, because so if you go on Instagram and you click on the search, you'll get a whole wide variety of different things. And sometimes as you click through, it's kind of like Facebook because they own it now. Instead of it being organic, you can find your way into like political feeds. And there are a lot of posts, surprisingly high number of posts on Instagram, where it's a picture of Barack Obama or Michelle Obama, and people will post something like, I miss my president, or I miss the real president or the real first family. And that is a real mantra and refrain that goes on the left side of the political aisle. And it goes back to them kind of worshiping him as opposed to seeing him as the president. So I get that. But last night was an opportunity for whoever was the rebuttal to the State of the Union to present the case to Americans who were literally waiting to watch the response on why the president was wrong. I don't think she accomplished that, if that was what she was supposed to be there to do.
Well, you hit on it before that, yeah, her entire gist was kind of trying to say that she was above the fray. She was holier than thou, that, again, taking the Obama approach of trying to make it, trying to argue, make the point that, I'm not political. I'm just saying how it is. I'm just saying, this is the America that there should be. There's no left or right in everything else. We're all Americans. Togetherness, John Kasich talk, kind of. Why can't we all get along? But then when you look at the words that they're actually saying and the policies that they're proposing, it's socialism. It's exactly what the president was talking about last night and announcing. But you now have a situation where the Democrats and news media and other liberal allies are basically saying, well, yeah, guess what? You're darn right. We are socialists.
Which is not a winning
formula.
formula.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, come on, guys.
Yeah.
But we're going to win. Well, what about Venezuela? Oh, Chris Matthews and Politico, and I think a few others doing this today. And last night they were like, no. That's just that. Socialism is like, Chris Matthews made the argument that it's basically like states. There's different kinds of socialism. There's different countries with socialism, and there are ones that work and there are ones that don't work. Just like how I was not alive. I've been on the show. I'm a younger person in my 20s, so I was not cogent for this, but I've been told that was the argument that people would be making in favor of the Soviet Union or in favor of communism. In favor of communism, that the Soviet Union was not a good example of communism.
It was the perfect example.
So here we are. Exactly. But it is a perfect example. Perhaps the best line President Trump has ever made was, I think, a year or two ago when he said, the problem with what's going on in Venezuela is not that socialism was implemented incorrectly. It was that it was implemented correctly.
Well, I like to liken the socialism and the descriptors that are added to it that are supposed to make it okay as me saying, so, Curtis, which kind of cancer would you like? Pancreatic or cancer of the brain? And if you say, well, I don't want any cancer. No. It's okay for you to have cancer. It just needs to be a certain kind of cancer, and then you'll really like it. That's what socialism is. It's horrible no matter what you...
socialism.
Well, it again, still socialism, so still cancer. That's the way I look at it. And
exactly.
What's interesting about you saying that you're younger and you weren't cogent for the descriptions, we still have the ability whether people are on the younger end like yourself or in the middle like myself, or even older people who might just now be coming to the realization that the Democrats are leaving them behind, is that there are so many good resources for which we can look and see what happens when you have socialism. Fictional books about the time frame and historical books that give us the true history, real people, real names, real events. I wanted you to touch on Brian Williams saying that Trump's call for a culture of life and end to late-term abortion was too graphic and a first for a national speech in his time. Why doesn't Brian Williams understand that the reason why he had to address that is because the Democrats are bringing this issue up and making it a national issue, not the president?
Right, exactly. I think that's exactly right. And I think it's also important, as I said, Mara Gay from the New York Times, to bring her up again a couple hours later, reiterated that same point. So it wasn't just Brian Williams that had this idea. Her argument was that, this is something that's very graphic that should only be talked about in a doctor's office or something like that, which kind of gives it away that they know that abortion is such a gruesome procedure. As for Brian Williams, he said, quote, graphic language on abortion, a first for a national speech in my time. Sticking it to the governor of Virginia tied it into the scandal. The problem is the president said, to defend the dignity of every person, I'm asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb. I don't really see what the, and then talking about basically late-term abortion and infanticide. I mean, it's, I saw a tweet today what the sign language, how you sign abortion. And it's gruesome. It's the exact same thing. It's like a twist and then like a shoving motion.
Right.
It's horrible. And so the Democrats have been caught here. I just think it's absolutely stunning how they've been caught about this. And they defend it by just saying, we're just talking about the health of the mother. Not the life of the mother now. We're talking about the health of the mother.
The mental health.
Which you can basically make it mean anything, And again, I just think back to, we all know someone who either has had children or was a preemie themselves. And you just think about those people and that there's almost no emotion on the part of Democrats. All the women in white and their male colleagues on the one side of the aisle, or people on television. They just talk about it with such fervor when it comes to abortion and the passion that they have for killing children. But when asked about infanticide, they'll just say that, you guys are just distorting this and it's ugly and none of your business. I mean, it's just crazy.
It's chilling.
It's ghoulish.
It is.
Ghoulish is the word that I've been using a lot in the last week and a half.
It's appropriate. Ghoulish is something that calls to mind what we're seeing, and chilling. For me, it's chilling because, so when you talk about knowing people, so one of my favorite people on this planet who does pro-life work is Ryan Baumberger. And I got to hear him speak in person. I've heard him speak before, watch the videos and stuff, but I got to hear him speak in person. Last year at our Marriage and Family Conference in Tupelo. And he talked about how his parents, who he's biracial, and he was adopted by a white couple who ended up adopting a ton of kids. And he said their house was just like this fun, almost like it's like an orphanage, but fun, because there were just so many kids that they adopted. And they had such a passion for them. But he is the product of rape. His mom chose to carry him to term and give him up for adoption. And this family adopted him and loved him. He got a great education. He grew up happy. And he is now married and has children of his own. And so this is a person who would not exist under the Democrats' vision of what it means to be a woman in America today. And I cannot imagine this world without Ryan Baumberger. And that's not, I've never met his wife. I've never met his kids. I've only seen pictures. I imagine they're just fantastic. But we're just talking about him, just him, and then all the people who wouldn't be here because he's here. And they're talking about kids like Ryan Baumberger when he was a baby, that he would just be left to die or somehow snuffed out. They don't really get specific, but we've seen the Gosnell movie. We know what it means. And I get when you're so rabid about something, you can't say this is wrong because you think it would make you lose. But about human beings, there's got to be a point at which you say, okay, fine, I yield. I'll yield to you on this one. I'm not going to go there There seems to be no place the Democrats won't go on this issue. Oh, my goodness.
The problem is Ralph Northam has said it himself. He said it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah, which was ghoulish and disgusting as well. You are fantastic, Curtis Houck. Thank you for coming on today, managing editor of Newsbusters. Appreciate you.
No problem, anytime.
All right, talk to you again soon. That's music, which means we have one segment left of this wonderful show. And so we'll have more for you when we get back. Keep it here. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. What do you call killing a baby just after birth? Infanticide, and it's a federal crime to do so in America. An abortion practitioner in Philadelphia was delivering babies alive and snipping their spines. Gosnell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It is unthinkable that anyone would actually advocate for this to be permissible in America. Yet in Virginia, Governor Northam and State Delegate Kathy Tran both did so. Tran offered up a bill which would make it possible for a doctor to deliver and then kill a baby at the direction of the mother. The bill failed to pass by one vote. Virginians will have a choice on re-electing delegates to the State House in the fall of this year. Let's pray they vote in candidates who value life. However, Delegate Tran does care for the life of caterpillars. She submitted legislation to save them on the same day as her infanticide bill. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Foreign dispatch.
In the US, it varies. In Britain, it's 70 miles an hour. France, more like 80. But among the world's rich countries, only one has roads with no speed limit. On Germany's Autobahn, the interstate-style highways that crisscross the country, you can drive as fast as you like on most of the network. But perhaps not for long. Experts recruited by the German government proposing a limit as part of a package of measures aimed at cutting greenhouse gas emissions. This under pressure from the EU. Germany's Transport Secretary is already bristling and voicing his opposition. Why this constant micromanagement, he told a newspaper. And while an opinion poll suggests a majority of Germans are in favour, the experts are primed for pushback. A draft document saying it'll take political deftness, diplomatic skill and a willingness to compromise to achieve the climate change goals. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacey on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Judiciary Committee should not be a theater for mischaracterizing or twisting nominees' records or views, nor should it be an avenue for persecution. You know, we've seen a growing pattern among Senate Democrats of hostility to religious faith. I have to say I was deeply troubled a few minutes ago to hear questioning of a nominee asking your personal views on what is sinful. In my view, that has no business in this committee. Article 6 of the Constitution says there should be no religious test for any public office. We have also seen Senate Democrats attack what they've characterized as religious dogma. We've seen Senate Democrats attack nominees for their own personal views on salvation. I don't believe this is a theological court of inquisition. I think the proper avenue for investigation of this committee is a nominee's record.
So that's Senator Ted Cruz talking after the confirmation hearing for Noemi Rao. She's been nominated by the president to serve on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and she's eminently qualified and really an excellent choice to go on that court to replace someone we affectionately call Justice Kavanaugh. So Cory Booker yesterday, I didn't get the audio for you because it's just so disgusting. The way he continually brings up homosexual sex whenever he is questioning nominees for anything if they're Republicans. He goes right into this tack of asking about their faith. And I'm linking these two things together. You've got Cory Booker basically implementing a religious test, and you have Ted Cruz saying it's unconstitutional for him to do so and he needs to stop it. He's making not only himself look bad, but he makes that entire Senate body look bad when he does this. And I did yesterday share, if you missed that, the podcast are at afr.net, urbanfamilytalk.com. I feel like these nominees should say it's none of your business what my personal views are. My personal views are a part of my free speech, which is protected by the Constitution. And you as a senator should be censured for asking me these things. That's what they should say. Votes, forget about it. They should start standing on their constitutionally protected rights. And they should also say, Cory Booker says, do you approve of same-sex marriage? What they should say is, what does it matter what I approve of? You ask me, I'm a Christian. God's word is the ultimate authority here, not me. So the bone that you pick is not with me. It's with someone greater who you will one day have to deal with. Since you brought it up, since you keep asking, why don't you reckon with the one with whom you have to deal? You have yet to address yourself to the true author and finisher of this thing you have a problem with. I'm not the problem for you, bro. I'm going to go do what I need to go do. Which brings me to this other issue. And admittedly, I am one of the people who from last week I felt really discouraged, deep down discouraged at all of this talk about infanticide and regular people who have medical degrees advocating for snuffing babies out after they're born and the lying that's been going on. That's not what we said. Yeah, it's what you said. But here's what we need to keep focused on. This is not a story that we lose. Ultimately, if you've read Revelation, you know that every single person will deal with God one-on-one at the judgment seat at some point. We don't know the day. We don't know the hour. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't even know all of the salient details. We just know it's going to occur. And those that have advocated for the murder of babies, those who have put this forward as something that we need to accept, those individuals will deal with the Almighty. No one will escape the judgment, and no one will get away with advocating for this or doing this as Gosnell did, or promoting this as Planned Parenthood does, or permitting it as some doctors have admitted that they do. No one will get away with it. So it is not for us to be discouraged or to become faint of heart at the prospect of Americans literally ripping a mask off, and underneath the mask where you thought it was like a regular person, we're seeing some nasty festering pit of evil and debauchery, and you're like recoiling and running away from it. And I don't blame you. It's scary. It's absolutely frightening that we have Americans advocating for this. But God, we don't shirk our responsibility to stand against this, to speak out against it, and to be firm in where we are on it, because it's not anything that you wrote. I didn't write it. Nobody at American Family Radio wrote it. Nobody that's standing in a pulpit anywhere or is online preaching anywhere wrote it. The Bible is God's word, not Stacy's, not anybody else's. It's God's word. And if you stand in opposition to it, if you're opposed to leaving God's creation alone and not snuffing it out. If it's your job to snuff out creation, you got bigger problems than me being on the radio. You got bigger problems than me talking about how infanticide is wrong. You have bigger problems than federal law that either says you can do it or says you can't. You have bigger problems than the Supreme Court, which has been wrong and will be wrong again and has been right and may possibly be right again. You have bigger problems than who's on the Supreme Court or anywhere else, because you're the one who's standing against it, not me. So it's not actually my specific problem. But I'm here to tell the truth about it. So if you want to know the truth, you can know it and you can get in line with it. Not my truth, what the word says. So speaking of being in line with what's right or what's wrong, this was another one of those moments in last night's speech that was just stellar. The president was speaking about this young man who is a Border Patrol agent, and he's just he's a law keeper. He is a rescuer of women and children who are being sexually trafficked. An outstanding young man. And as he's talking to him, he makes a promise to the American people that he'll never stand by and allow ICE and the heroes who work there to be abolished. It's number 6.
Thanks to his work and that of his incredible colleagues, more than 300 women and girls have been rescued from the horror of this terrible situation, and more than 1,500 sadistic traffickers have been put behind bars. We will always support the brave men and women of law enforcement, and I pledge to you tonight.
So what the president is saying there is that we have to support these people, and these people being ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. These individuals, many of them are Hispanic. They're from Latin origins, and they're fighting this war because they care about children. They're involved in the work that they do. They're there because they want to protect people, and so there's a real kind of twisting of the language surrounding immigration and customs enforcement. And people want to make it so that it's something horrible that oh, we should be so ashamed of it. Oh, it's just terrible. No. These guys are doing good work. They're in law enforcement. They're trying to enforce the laws that are on the books, constitutional, the laws that have stood the test of time about how you are allowed to enter this country, and to protect women and children who are being trafficked. And to stop the drug cartels. And I renew my call. There's anyone who listens to this show who also speaks to the president, or anyone on his staff, that the drug cartels should be declared terrorist organizations, as Daniel Horowitz over at Conservative Review has written in his op-ed over there. Declare them terrorist organizations so that you can use everything at our disposal to stop them. Stop it where it starts, instead of waiting until they send their MS-13 here and then trying to deal with it here. Deal with it where they are. Kind of like what we do in the Middle East, which, again, the nation building, it's so over. Like 2012 called and they want their nation building back. We got to let that go. We got to let that go. So thank you for being here today. I have just a couple more things I want to talk about. So remember when we were talking about Bernie Sanders and his red face? We've seen this before. The self-described Democratic socialists, him and Ocasio-Cortez, which we didn't get to pan to her face when the president was making this statement, but it's Bernie Sanders who has really made socialism palatable on the left. And what we have to do is we have to reject it out of hand. And because I know some Democrats who are older who I've talked to before, about this subject of the socialism. And whenever I say, hey, I know we disagree on a ton of stuff, but can I ask you about the socialism? Like, are you down with that? They always say, no, we're not for socialism. Everybody knows socialism leads to communism. These are Democrats who say this. So this new wing of the party that wants to take control, it's not as if the rank and file Democrats are actually down with the socialism. It's that they've got these really loud, squeaky wheels, and Nancy Pelosi is just trying to keep all the spinning tops from bursting out of the corral. She's just trying to keep she's trying to keep the bag of crazy inside. the bag. The crazy cats, she's trying to keep them in the bag. And they're scratching each other's eyes out, but as long as she can keep them all contained in the bag so they can vote together, then she thinks she can make some headway. It's ridiculous, but, what are you going to do? I'm also going to post, and maybe we'll share a little bit of it. Our new senator, the junior senator from the state of Missouri, Josh Hawley, had some very, very strong remarks on the floor of the Senate. He was talking about infanticide and abortion, and I want to share a little bit of that with you, but I'm previewing that for you for tomorrow. I'm going to do my best to have that as something that we can check out tomorrow. And so overall, I know we've been kind of assessing the speech. I think it was really interesting that we had callers today who said they know real life living Democrats who were, swayed by the president's presentation last night. I think it's really interesting. They didn't show very many live shots of the Supreme Court justices, just a couple. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was not there. A number of other justices weren't there, I think, kind of standing in solidarity with her, so they had 4 there, 5 were not there. They did pan over to their faces when the president was talking about abortion, and a couple of them, they looked pretty disgusted, and not in the way like you and I are disgusted. But there's all of that going on. But the true deadline that we're approaching here, it's the 6th of February. The deadline is the 15th. The 15th is when they have to come up with something. And I just think it was so brilliant that the president did not declare a national emergency last night, the State of the Union. He used the State of the Union address to do what State of the Union addresses are meant to do, which is to discuss the state of our union and to give the American people an opportunity to hear directly from the president and to offer what he felt were solutions. 76% approval on that speech is a game changer. The president's approval rating overall, just before he gave the speech, had actually went up to 48%. And I hate to say it because I'm not a tinfoil hat wearer, but I do think some of what we're seeing with the approval rating for the president is it's intended to depress his base and to encourage the Democrats. So it was a real interesting thing that he is so able to work a crowd. Like what we saw with him and the Democrats last night, where the Democrats couldn't help themselves, they had to stand up. Even the image that I've shared on Facebook where Nancy Pelosi is basically offering the president fake claps. She's clapping and pointing at him at the same time. In other words, oh, you think you did something, and she's clapping in a very sarcastic way. It has become an image that has been shared all over the place, and it's very petty of her to treat him that way, especially when if she was on the other foot and he was the Speaker of the House and she was giving the speech as the president and he clapped at her that way, she would say that was misogyny and sexism. You see how that it's like this cudgel that only works for Democrats. You never see them say, wow, Nancy, that was kind of disrespectful that you were clapping at him like that. Why couldn't you just hold the office? She says he's petty, but look how she behaves. Another thing that was really interesting about last night was that the numbers. Fox News had 11.1 million viewers, NBC 7.1 million, CBS 6.7 million, ABC 5.9 million. Fox, local Fox, Sinclair, had 4.2 million, MSNBC had 3.8 million, and CNN had 3.4 million. That's a lot of Americans. I mean, that's a lot of Americans who took time out of their evening. And I love that it was an hour, so give or take an hour of your time to just turn it on. You don't have to watch, just listen. I love that Americans are being informed. So apparently the president has announced that his first rally of 2019 will be held in El Paso, Texas. I'm pretty sure he's going to talk a lot about border security and what that means to Texans. I'm really happy that he's having a rally. Can't wait to see what that's going to be about. Okay, we're back with you tomorrow. God bless you. Have a fantastic evening. And thanks for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.